Hello everyone and welcome back to Prestige Reef. Now I wasn't going to do a video for you guys today because I was going to spend the day adding corals to that system. All the corals are doing reasonably well. I'll show you in a minute. There is one thing that has concerned me. It doesn't concern me massively, but it is a minor concern. But I think I know what the reason is, and I'll explain what I'm doing about that now anyway. Where we left off, there was an electrical issue with the power tripping, and there was also an issue with the I had a problem with the communication cable for the cage director. I will give you a quick update on those as well as anything else, and then I'm going to go get some more coral, and then maybe you'll see me at the end with a few more corals. But let's just see how far we get. Right now, as I said, there was an issue with the cage director, and the issue with the cage director was the Cat 5 cable, which runs above the ceiling. Now what I've done is I have installed a temporary Cat 8 cable, which is shielded, so it can't be, it's not meant to be able to be interfered with electricity. And it's a much shorter cable as well, and it's also apparently a much better cable, so where it transfers data faster. So that has fixed the problem. There is, however, a different problem with the cage director now. The sample tube has a maximum amount on it, which is 50 millilitres. Now the sample tube I've installed, because it goes above the ceiling, is 132 millilitres. Now that tube works, but the software won't allow you to enter more than 50 millilitres in. So I've contacted GHL to see if there's a way of overriding that. If not, what I have to do is this. I'll have to transfer the cage director over to here, and then have the dosing pumps moved over to that side. Now the reason I wanted the cage director over there was just on the odd chance that it leaked, it wouldn't leak into the system here. Those of you that follow me on Instagram will know that the Nile skimmer has produced its first skimmate, because I said I was like a proud father. And it's actually a surprisingly large amount considering there is only corals in this system. Although that might change soon because I may add my first fish, but I'm not sure what it will be yet. And then with regards to the electrics, I'm literally the last person that should be explaining what was happening with the electrics because I'm not entirely sure. But I believe what was happening was all of the lights were coming on at the same time, which was causing a temporary surge and then tripping out the power. What I've got them to do is upgrade the power cable anyway, because we were reasonably close to the limit with everything that was in this room. Now we're miles off the limit. They have put loads and loads of different circuits in the ceiling, and they've upgraded the fuse board. I'm also going to have the lights set so that they come on at a staggered time, so that they come on sort of 15 minutes apart, just to make sure, although I have been informed that that won't be an issue anymore. The other thing I only noticed this week is that the RO unit is producing a lot of condensation on the outside of it, which is dripping down and leaving a puddle here. The only thing I can do is somehow try and insulate it, but I'm not quite sure how I'm going to deal with that yet. Obviously there's a reasonable amount of humidity in this room. It doesn't actually feel that humid in here, but when obviously when the water's much colder, then it obviously is having a significant impact. It's actually quite nice in here now that it's winter. You walk in on a cold day and it feels like you're on a tropical island because of all the lights and the heat and the humidity. So I get the feeling that the colder it gets, the more I'm going to enjoy being in here. The other thing I've just noticed is that you know how James has OCD with regards to all the wires and pipes and cables and everything? Well, James has stuck this on upside down. So he obviously was having a bad day that day. Now as you can see, little bits of filament are just starting to appear on the egg crate. Now I don't know if this is the calm before the storm. This is the reason I might add a fish at some point soon, or just some cleanup crew. Cycling a tank with coral is just as new to me as it is to you guys, so very interested to see how this process is going, especially now we're starting to see a little bit more activity, a little bit more biological activity. It's still reading as 0 ammonia. Obviously now that it's been 2 weeks, so far so good, and hopefully it continues that way. Right, so let's take a quick look at the corals. These corals you see at the front are the original batch. All of the cuts on them have healed, which is good, and some of them appear to be growing. The only thing that I will say, which is what I mentioned at the beginning, when I said there's a slight issue, is that these corals are slightly more faded than they are in my 1,000 litre tank, especially the red digi. Now the reason for this is because this system has much lower nutrients. So to combat this, what I've started doing is feeding them a little bit more than usual, but not a lot. And I've also been dosing nitrate and phosphate just to get those levels up. Now I know what some of you will be thinking, the concept of dosing nitrate and phosphate seems crazy because most people want to try and get rid of it. But a system that has very, very low nutrients gets this pastel effect where the corals sort of look very faded. It's what you get from zeovit systems. Now I know some of you will wonder why I am dosing phosphate and nitrate rather than just increasing feeding, and it's because I want everything to be very precise. If you just throw more food in and hope for the best, you don't actually know how much phosphate and how much nitrate you're adding to the system. Whereas, and also as I said, I don't want an ammonia spike. Whereas by adding them in very, very small amounts every few days, I can increase it in a very controlled manner rather than trying to rather than just throwing stuff in. It tells you on the back exactly how much phosphate you're adding. There was a study that showed that corals grow better when being fed directly rather than the systems being dosed with nitrate and phosphate. So that's why I'm actually feeding the corals as well as dosing this as well, but I'm only doing very, very small target feeding. Now I know originally I said I was going to add a huge amount all in one go, but there really is no reason to do that because obviously the tank's at my parents' house and they don't really care at the moment. So what I'm going to do is what I did yesterday, where I bring over a large colony, frag it up into about 30, 40, 50 pieces, and then just have a nice relaxing time rather than trying to rush it. I actually quite enjoyed yesterday's frag session. It's quite therapeutic if you actually enjoy doing it. Now, some of you might be wondering why there's a lone frag plug here. That actually was a bounce mushroom, which I put on there yesterday and has come off, and it was floating around here. So it's now currently down here looking unhappy. What I will do, that's probably because it's got no light, is I'll stick it back on again. Mushrooms are notoriously hard to stick down. It's only got one single grain of sand for it to stick to. So I'll try it again in a minute, and hopefully that will, hopefully the second time's a charm. The one final thing to mention with this tank is that I put the max spec block there just to block some of the flow from the MP40s. Now what I find interesting is that the coral frags here are still moving. So even though there's something that is blocking the flow directly, there's enough turbulence in this tank to be able to still move them, even though they're not getting any direct flow at all, which obviously is a good sign because it shows it's very varied flow rather than very direct. Right, that's it for in here. So I'm going to go grab another colony and I'll show you what I do with it. Right, now, as you can see, I've grabbed a load of digis, all different colours, red, green, the silver and purple one. Very first thing I always do is pour away all the old water, because just in case there's anything, like this whole process is about minimising the chance of transferring things from one tank to another. Now, these corals aren't being quarantined because obviously they've essentially been quarantined in the other tank for a long time. The second reason is because it allows them to produce like a slime, although digis don't actually produce a lot of slime compared to some of the other corals, but it's like a protective layer. And then what I do is I take the water from the tank that they are going to go into and then dip them in that water. So just slowly pouring it in. Now the reason it's really important to measure it out is so you know exactly how much dip to use. So I'm going to take them inside to the house now and then dip them there. Now something I forgot to mention a minute ago is the reason that they're already fragged rather than a whole colony was because I didn't have enough salt water to top up my other tank. So I thought just frag them and then you can take less water. For me, dipping corals is a 3-stage process. The first thing that happens is they go into a bath of Coral RX for 15 minutes. Now I've been using Coral RX for a long time now. Then they'll go into the tank water again with no dip in it for 15 minutes. And then they'll go into a second dip for 15 minutes. And anything that's on them that survives that deserves to live. But as I said, it's worked well for me over the years, and I've had very few things to battle. All the cuts on there that you see have been created by me. The most important thing that I focus on is not letting any rock or dead pieces of coral skeleton get in where possible. Now obviously there's certain corals where you haven't got a choice and you have to transfer over, but to me it doesn't matter how encrusted it is, it gets cut off and then fragged and put onto a frag plug, because that's where all the nasties like to hide. They like to hide on the base. And the other thing about frags is there's literally nowhere to hide. With a lot of these, I literally just have to turn them around. I can see both sides. If I've got a colony, it's far more dimensional, which means there's far more hiding places. Now once I've added the dip to the water, I then just take a turkey baster and give everything a good blast. And I'll do this approximately every 5 minutes, because anything like flatworms, this is the easiest way to get them off. And I also do this for each individual piece as I transfer it between each of the containers. Now while the corals are in the second dip, which is the water that doesn't have either coral dips in, I like to get some paper, put it underneath the container which they were dipped in, and then just see what there is. Now, this one, as expected, doesn't really have anything in it, because obviously it's not, there's no rock or dead bits. It's literally just the coral. So the only bits that really are in there are some bits of fragments of coral and some slime, basically, and that's pretty much it. There isn't even any copepods or anything. And then the second dip is an iodine-based dip, which is to heal with any cuts or breaks there is. And what I would like to point out is that you can see that I'm mixing different corals while dipping, and not different corals because they're all digis or digitata, but they are, I wouldn't be doing this with a digitata and a euphilia and a toadstool, for example. I'd have each of them in their own dipping container. The only other thing I'd like to mention is that this process I don't use for all corals. Some corals are more sensitive than others, so this has worked pretty well for me for certain SPS corals. This is a very specific method which I'm using for this specific type of coral. I wouldn't use this for all corals. And finally, after all that, they get to go in the tank. Now, usually I would stick them on the frag plugs now, immediately. However, if I spend the time sticking these all onto frag plugs, I won't get this video uploaded today. So I will do the video and then I'll come back and I'll stick them down. But it also gives them a chance to let some of the slime come off. Right, that's it for today, guys. Sorry once again, it felt pretty rushed. Hope you enjoyed watching the video. Please feel free to comment below if you have any questions. If you did enjoy it, why not click that like and subscribe button. Have a good week, and I'll see you next time.